I am going to start with a disclaimer. If you hear crying in the background, it's my lovely children. It's bedtime and they don't want to go, but they did. So I am going to bring you my first ever book wrap up. So these are the books that I read in March. Here are some of them, and I'm going to just sort of show them to you, tell you a little bit about them. March is when I really got back into reading. If you watched my video before this, you saw that I talked about how I can't craft right now, so I've been reading a lot, and there's going to be this video and then a haul, and then I'm going to do a video showing you the current state of my craft room, and everything will make sense to you. But so I read, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books in March, and I was really close to finishing 10. So close, but I didn't make it, but that's okay. So the first books that I read were actually the end of a series. So it was The Yellow Brick War and The End of Oz, which are both part of the Dorothy Must Die series. This is a retelling of The Wizard of Oz in that it has characters from The Wizard of Oz, and that's about where the comparison ends. Everything you think you know is ass backwards. Dorothy, not the hero, not the heroine of this book at all, hence why she must die. And so I really liked the series, and I read the first books, and I read the first 2 books when I first found out about them, and I went through them really, really fast, and somehow, I know I went right out and bought the other 2 because they're actually in hardcover, and I don't know, adopted 2 children and changed my entire life, but I had sort of forgotten about them. And then I saw them on my bookshelves and I thought, I need to finish it. So I did, and I was pretty happy with the way it ended. There is also a set of 3 novellas that have a bunch of different stories in them about other characters in the series, and I own 2 of them, which you will see in my haul, and I just don't have one of them, but I have not read those yet. I'm kind of saving those because I really loved this world, and getting to read those will be like jumping back in without committing to rereading the entire series. Speaking of retellings, this is another book that I've owned for a very long time, Splintered by A.G. Howard. Oh, by the way, those were by Daniel Page. Splintered by A.G. Howard, and isn't that beautiful? So I mostly looked at this book in a bookstore and thought, oh, that's pretty, and then I picked it up and it said Alice in Wonderland retelling. I'm obsessed with Alice, so that was a definite. This is the first book in the series, and I really liked it. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews of what people thought about it. In this case, Alice, well, it's Alyssa, but our Alice for these purposes, at least overarching, it's complicated. Anyway, Alyssa, she thinks she's going crazy, like her mother has gone crazy, and she hears bugs and flowers and things talking to her, and she is going to quickly find out that there's a lot more to her story, including a lot more to Lewis Carroll's story, and it isn't all made up. I have not read the rest of these. There are I believe 2 more full books and 2 novellas, and I just haven't bought them or anything yet, but I'm definitely going to. I have heard that some people liked the first book and thought it kind of went downhill from there, so we'll see. The next book, so I read those fairy tale retellings, and that was great, and I was in this fantasy world, and I thought, I need a break. Enter my favorite author, Janet Evanovich. I always say Evanovich, but I listened to her at a book signing and reading once, and she said Evanovich, so there you go. And this is Hardcore 24 and is the 24th book in the Stephanie Plum series. Stephanie Plum is a bounty hunter. She's not a very good bounty hunter. She has 2 men in her life, and her world is interesting. There are always cars blowing up. There's her crazy grandma who carries a gun. There's those 2 hot men that I mentioned. And these books are completely predictable. You basically know the formula of the story before you go into it, but they are so enjoyable that I've already pre-ordered number 25 because they are just a great palate cleanser, and they're fun. If you know somebody who thinks they don't like to read and they want sort of a quick, fun book, I highly recommend these. They don't necessarily need to be read in order because, like I said, they're all sort of the same basic thing. I actually like all of Janet Evanovich's books series that I've read. She has some that are a little bit more supernatural. Those are pretty fun, and one of the characters from those shows up in this book. So, Hardcore 24. The next book that I read was A Case for Jamie. If you know me, by Brittany Cavallaro. If you know me in real life, I have probably told you you need to read A Study in Charlotte, because I found these books and they are a retelling of Sherlock Holmes. I like Sherlock Holmes, so that's a good start. They are Charlotte Holmes and Jamie Watson, and they are descendants of Holmes and Watson. And that could be a really kind of like cheesy thing, like, oh, they're going to do the same thing. It's not. They definitely have their own stories, their own personalities. You clearly see like the Sherlock Holmes character in Charlotte. She has a bit of a drug problem. They've gone through some stuff, and this is the third book in the series. And I thought this was the last in a trilogy. And then I just saw on BookTube the other day, somebody said there's going to be more. I can't wait. They're really fun books. They are told... They're teenagers that the stories are about, and the first one takes place in a boarding school in Connecticut, and also takes place in London for part of the time, and it's a really fun series, but it's really good writing, and the mysteries are pretty intriguing, and I don't always figure them out. I like that in a mystery. This is probably my favorite book I read this month. Caravelle by Stephanie Garber. And let me tell you, there is a sequel coming out. I just read a sample of that sequel, and yeah, I'm excited for it. This is a very divisive book. Look at that shimmer. Sorry, squirrel? This is a very divisive book. People either loved this book or they pretty much hated this book. I loved this book. One of the things that I thought was so neat is that our main character, Scarlett, she describes feelings with colors, and it was just such an intriguing concept, and it made the description so interesting, and the world of Caravelle is so interesting. And so Scarlett has been trying to go to this game of Caravelle for a long time, since her mother disappeared. She's been writing letters, and she's been asking to be invited. She gets invited, as does her sister, and things get interesting from there. And Caravelle, the whole thing it says on here is, remember, it's only a game until it isn't, kind of thing. But just the world that was created, I just thought was so beautiful, and I couldn't stop reading it because I wanted to know what happened. And the worst part about this book is when it was over. So when I found out there was going to be a sequel, I was very excited. Now, to be fair, the sequel is told by a different character than Scarlett. And in the sample I read, I was missing Scarlett a little bit. But I'm pretty sure that will go away once I get into the book as a whole. But I highly recommend this. It's a beautiful book. The world is just beautiful. If you like the Night Circus, this kind of reminded me of that, except I hated the Night Circus. I know, everybody's supposed to love it. I didn't enjoy it. I finished it. It was okay. I thought this was better. And then I took a totally different route. This is something you're going to see if you follow any of my book videos, is that I am not a certain type of reader. I don't read just historical fiction. I don't read just contemporary, just YA. I kind of read a bit of everything. And I like mixing it up that way so I don't get sick of sort of the same kind of things. I read Undressing Mr. Darcy. Jane Austen, always a good thing. Undressing Mr. Darcy, if it's Colin Firth, I'm in. This book was a romance book, contemporary, and it is about 35-year-old Vanessa, and she is a social media master. So she does PR for people, and she agrees to help out her aunt, who is part of like an Austen fan club thing, but like a huge one. And this guy is coming over, and he wrote a book to try and save his like mansion that's falling apart in England, and he acts like Mr. Darcy, and he does like this kind of striptease where he's like teaching about all the parts of the dressing back then. It's not as cheesy as one would think, because it actually has a plot that goes through. She has some friends in this book, like female friends, and I think that's refreshing when you see a romance where the female friends are not stabbing you in the back. So that was good, and the character and her aunt had this really good relationship. Her aunt faces some health problems in it, and it was just a pretty well-rounded book, enjoyable, fun read. The next book that I read, I actually read, I read it on my iPad because I am pretty much anti-ebooks, except when they're free, and then when you find out that if you're going to get ARCs from most places, which are advanced reader copies in case you don't know, they're going to be an ebook version. So I went and bought a new Kindle because, well, actually my husband ordered it because I kept hemming and hawing about it. But I read Moriarty by Anthony Horowitz. I know, more Sherlock Holmes. This book it was good. It was a little slow in parts, and I was kind of like, okay, I sort of see where this is going. I thought I did. And then I got to the end and I went, what? What just happened here? I actually really want to go reread the book and see how I could have possibly figured it out, but I'm not sure I could have because it was such a moment. And that to me is a really good thing in a book. I'm going to read the rest of Anthony Horowitz's books that are sort of set in the Sherlock Holmes realm, and see if they're as good. And I would definitely recommend it, especially if you like Sherlock Holmes. But it was also just a kind of neat little like mystery. And the last book that I read, I don't have to show you the picture. I have the arc of it, but it's literally just the words. How cute is this case, by the way? I just got that off of Amazon too. It was called Over Raging Tides, and it was the first book that I got an arc of, and I was going to review. And I'm going to review it for you now. What? Why? I don't understand. It was a good book. It wasn't a great book. It wasn't a terrible book. If you've ever seen the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, put girls in their place, and you have read this book in a lot of ways. It had a lot of potential, and I really liked the main character, and I liked a lot of the things that were going on, and it is the beginning of a series. Sometimes the beginning of a series has a problem where it is all build up and nothing happens, and that definitely happened in this book. Jennifer Ellison, who wrote it, is a great writer. Her writing was beautiful. It was fine. It's about a young girl who was raised on this ship. She is the quartermaster of the ship. It's an all-female crew. A man ends up on board, so of course chaos ensues. But there are some fantastical creatures called the Mordgree, and her mother was stolen, and all of these things happen, and we find out all of these things, and then I got to the end and I went, where's the rest of the book? It was 283 pages. It wasn't like a super short book, but I definitely need the second one so I get some plot line. But I will read the second one, so that must mean it's something worthwhile. And if you look up this book, the cover is gorgeous. So those are the books that I read in March, all 9 of them. And I would love to hear if any of you have read any of them, have any interest in reading any of them, any questions. I did not give them star ratings because what's a 3 to me might be a 5 to you, might be a 4 to somebody else. And I'm not sure how useful they are. If you guys would like me to do that, I can. But for now, this is what you get. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for a book haul because BookTube introduced me to Book Outlet, and I have a problem now. But I can admit it. That's the first step, right? Thanks for watching. Bye.